Welcome to Context 101. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The world order is shifting. What once seemed unshakable is now showing signs of strain, as the balance of global power begins to tilt in unexpected directions. The alliances and institutions that have defined the last 3 decades are being tested like never before. On January 9, 2026, 2 core EU members have made a historic move, aligning with the BRICS bloc, led by China and Russia, and challenging decades of Western dominance. This unprecedented decision has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, as leaders and analysts scramble to understand the motivations and consequences behind this bold realignment. For years, the European Union has stood as a pillar of the Western alliance, but now, its very foundation appears to be shifting. This is more than a headline. It's a seismic crack in the post-Cold War consensus, signaling a realignment of global power. The symbolic wall that separated East from West is fracturing, and with it, the assumptions that have guided international relations for a generation. Markets are reacting, alliances are being questioned, and the world is watching closely as the old order gives way to something new and uncertain. For the first time, nations from the heart of the Western alliance are pivoting toward a rival sphere, raising urgent questions. Is the era of US-led unipolarity over? What does this mean for NATO, for the transatlantic partnership, and for the very idea of a unified West? The shock is not just political but deeply personal for millions who have grown up in a world shaped by Western ideals and leadership. Are we entering a world of competing blocs? Will the future be defined by new alliances, rival economic systems, and shifting spheres of influence? The choices made today could echo for decades, shaping the lives of billions and redrawing the map of global power. The implications are vast, from trade and security to the price of goods in your local store. Every aspect of daily life, from the stability of your job to the cost of your groceries, could be affected by these tectonic shifts. As supply chains reroute and new economic policies emerge, the ripple effects will be felt in ways both visible and invisible. In the coming minutes, we'll break down how this happened, what it means for the EU, BRICS, and the US, and why it matters for all of us. We'll explore the forces driving this realignment, the key players involved, and the potential outcomes for the global community. Join us as we unpack one of the most significant geopolitical realignments of our time, a story that is still unfolding and whose consequences will shape the world for generations to come. The European Union was built to bind Europe together after the devastation of 2 world wars, with the hope that economic cooperation would make future conflicts unthinkable. From its earliest days, the EU was more than just a political project. It was a vision for a peaceful, prosperous continent, where nations would work together rather than compete. Over time, the EU created the world's largest single market, allowing goods, services, and people to move freely across borders. This economic integration was matched by a unified voice for democracy, human rights, and free trade, making the EU a global standard-bearer for liberal values. For decades, the EU partnered closely with the United States, working side by side to shape the rules of the global order. Together, they promoted stability, security, and economic growth, often setting the agenda at major international forums like NATO, the G7, and the United Nations. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a new force was quietly emerging. BRICS, originally just an acronym coined by economists, became a formal bloc in 2009, uniting Brazil, Russia, India, China, and later South Africa. Their goal, to challenge Western dominance and push for a more multipolar world where power is more evenly distributed. At first, many dismissed BRICS as a loose coalition with little real influence. But behind the scenes, the group quietly built its own institutions, like the New Development Bank, and steadily expanded its reach. Over the years, more countries expressed interest in joining, drawn by the promise of a new global order. Today, BRICS represents over half the world's population, and nearly 40% of global GDP. Its members are some of the fastest-growing economies, and their collective influence is reshaping international trade, finance, and diplomacy. As BRICS grew in strength and ambition, the EU found itself facing a series of crises that tested its unity and resolve. The financial turmoil of the late 2000s, the shock of Brexit, the unprecedented challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the war in Ukraine all put immense pressure on the European project. In this climate, some EU member states, feeling sidelined or at odds with Brussels, began to question whether sticking to old alliances and established norms was still in their best interest. Debates over sovereignty, economic policy and foreign relations grew louder, reflecting a continent in search of new direction. This search for new partners and fresh opportunities set the stage for today's unprecedented pivot, as both the EU and BRICS navigate a rapidly changing world and redefine their roles on the global stage. In late 2025, Hungary and Greece stunned the world by announcing their alignment with BRICS as strategic partners. This move followed months of high-level talks and growing frustration with what they saw as one-sided economic policies from Washington. Hungary's Viktor Orbán, long an advocate of balancing East and West, saw this as the culmination of his Eastern opening policy. For Greece, memories of harsh austerity and the lure of BRICS investment, without Western strings, proved decisive. Both leaders insisted this wasn't a betrayal, but a pragmatic step for national prosperity. The world is bigger than Europe and its traditional partners, declared Greece's prime minister. But for Brussels and Washington, this dual allegiance is a dangerous precedent threatening Western cohesion. The U.S. response was immediate and tough. President Trump announced a 10% tariff on any country aligning with BRICS, targeting Hungary and Greece directly. These tariffs hit key exports, cars, electronics, agriculture, making them pricier and less competitive in the U.S. market. Washington's message: loyalty to the alliance brings benefits, straying comes at a cost. BRICS leaders condemned the move, calling it economic coercion. The EU now faces a dilemma: defend its members and risk a wider trade war, or pressure Hungary and Greece to back down, exposing internal fractures. The standoff has escalated a political decision into a full-blown economic conflict. The world is watching to see if the EU will hold together or splinter under pressure. The stakes for global trade and alliances have never been higher. Hungary and Greece's pivot has shattered EU solidarity and forced a reckoning in Brussels. Punishing them risks deepening the rift. Doing nothing invites more defections and weakens the bloc. In Washington, the move undermines US leadership and complicates its global strategy. For BRICS, it's a strategic victory, proof that their alternative is attractive even to Western nations. This emboldens BRICS to push harder for de-dollarization and multipolarity. Other countries, especially in the global south, are watching closely. If Hungary and Greece succeed, more may follow. The world is moving from clear alliances to a fluid, unpredictable landscape of shifting interests. The era of a single global system is ending, replaced by competing blocs and constant recalibration. The economic fallout was swift. News of U.S. tariffs sent markets tumbling in Europe, the U.S., and Asia. Hungarian and Greek exports to America became more expensive overnight, threatening jobs and revenue. Companies now face tough choices: absorb costs, raise prices, or seek new markets in the BRICS bloc. A slow, costly process. The trade war is escalating, with tit-for-tat tariffs and retaliatory moves from China. The global economy is fragmenting as BRICS builds its own payment systems and standards, separate from the West. This division means higher costs, inefficiencies, and a world where companies must choose which bloc to operate in. The era of cheap, seamless global trade is under threat. Everyone, from businesses to consumers, will feel the impact. These high-level decisions have real consequences for ordinary people. In Hungary and Greece, factory workers and farmers face layoffs as exports dry up. US and European consumers will see higher prices on everything from cars to olive oil as tariffs ripple through supply chains. Inflation rises, and the era of cheap goods may be ending. The political divide also strains the sense of European unity, making students and workers feel like outsiders in their own continent. Ultimately, this global split breeds anxiety and uncertainty, challenging the stability we've long taken for granted. The choices made in distant capitals are shaping our daily lives and our future. Experts agree. Hungary and Greece's recent diplomatic maneuvers are not isolated events, but rather part of a much broader shift in the global order. These moves reflect a growing trend among nations to diversify their alliances and assert greater independence on the world stage. As countries like Hungary and Greece seek new partnerships, they are signaling a desire to move beyond traditional power structures and explore alternative avenues for growth and security. The old US-centered system, which dominated international relations for decades, is gradually giving way to a more complex landscape with multiple centers of influence. The expansion of BRICS, for example, is a clear sign that emerging economies are demanding a greater voice in global affairs. This shift is not just about economics or politics, it's about a fundamental rebalancing of power that could reshape the rules of international engagement. Economists caution that decoupling from major economies like China comes with significant risks. Such moves can disrupt established supply chains, drive up costs for consumers, and slow the pace of technological innovation. The ripple effects are felt worldwide as businesses and governments alike grapple with the challenges of adapting to a less predictable, more fragmented global economy. For military strategists, this evolving landscape presents a major test for alliances like NATO and the broader Western security framework. The question is whether these alliances can remain cohesive and effective when some members begin to align themselves with rival powers or pursue their own interests more assertively. The answers will shape the future of collective defense and international stability. Meanwhile, some scholars argue that a multipolar world could ultimately be more balanced and just. They believe that as power becomes more widely distributed, global institutions like the United Nations will be forced to reform, making them more responsive to the needs and voices of developing nations. This could lead to a more inclusive and representative international system. Increased competition among nations, they say, might foster innovation and create opportunities for fairer trade and cooperation. However, the transition to this new order is unlikely to be smooth. Economic and political turbulence is expected as countries adjust to shifting alliances and new rules of engagement. The implications of this transformation extend far beyond trade and economics. They reach into the very heart of global security, governance, and the way nations interact with one another. Issues like cybersecurity, climate change, and migration will require new forms of collaboration and trust. As the world is being remade before our eyes, no country or community is immune to the consequences. The choices made today will determine not only the balance of power, but also the prospects for peace, prosperity, and cooperation in the decades to come. We stand at a crossroads. Hungary and Greece's BRICS alignment is a clear sign that the old Western-led order is fading. This single act has triggered tariffs, market turmoil, and deep fractures in the EU and NATO. The coming months will decide, can the West restore unity, or will the split become permanent? Will Hungary and Greece thrive, or pay the price for their gamble? Understanding these shifts is essential for everyone, not just leaders, but citizens and consumers. The tectonic plates of global power are moving, and the outcome will shape our world for decades. Stay informed, stay engaged. The future is being written now, and we all have a stake in it.